Hello, everyone. Today I'm joined by John Wihtol. We'll introduce John in a second. We're going to talk about marketing strategy, specifically about the planning process and how do you implement your plan, how do you form your plan, and what's the feedback you want to pay attention to refine your plan. So, having a tight control loop and using assessments of return on marketing to help guide your decision making moving forward. Okay. So before we get started, I'm going to let John take a moment to introduce himself. John's one of my old good friends from back in high school.
Old.
Yeah, of course.
Still
Longtime
good
friend.
friends, right?
Yeah. And John, why don't you go ahead and give some info about yourself?
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Connor. So yeah, like Connor said, old friends. We went to high school together. I think we played on the same basketball team. Worked some of our first jobs together at Nordstrom's, selling
Yeah.
shoes. And then after high school, I got my undergrad at Columbia University as an econ major there. After graduating, I got a job in the Bay Area um, at a business planning software company called Adaptive Insights. And so my job there was basically to take companies' Excel models and basically shift those into this cloud-based software.
So it's a
And
cloud software
so,
company, and you were in client service role.
yeah, basically in client services, somewhat of a consultant role.
Okay. What
Um,
type of clients would you have? Like, were they other startup companies or they big established companies or like restaurants? Like, who is your client base?
it was more, it was bigger companies, not like enterprise level, so
Yeah,
not like Verizon's and
yeah.
Google's, um, but also not just like restaurants. It might have been like a restaurant chain or
Okay.
something like that. So mid-sized companies mostly.
And they'd have data in Excel sheets or something like that, and just wouldn't be in the cloud. And if it's in the cloud, it'd be easier to manage. You could look at it on your phone or
Right.
a desktop or laptop or.
Yeah, exactly. So, if there's, 100 other finance managers at your company,
Hmm.
you guys can all share data, consolidate it and look at, some nice fancy reports.
Okay, cool.
So it's kind of like a more
Yeah.
structured Google Sheets
And you were at that
almost.
company for 2 or 3 years?
I was at that company for, yeah, three
Okay.
years. And then I got another job at basically a competitor of that company
Uh-huh.
in San Francisco. And I think initially I just wanted to live in San Francisco
Yeah.
mostly. It was a smaller company. It was basically a startup. I think there were only 8 people there when I started. So it was, a little bit of a risk.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they've been
And,
doing really well. They're up to 1,400 people
wow.
now.
That's Anaplan?
That's Anaplan.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you eventually left Anaplan, but are still working with Anaplan in a way. Why don't you talk about
Yes.
that decision and how your role
Yeah.
kind of changed?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. So at Anaplan, again, it was similar, like business planning software, but unlike my first company, Anaplan was more for like large enterprise companies. So, more like a Google or a Verizon size
Yeah.
company. And so, yeah, so when I left there and I was thinking about starting, my own consulting firm just off the side. Some other old colleagues had basically kind of already done that.
Hmm.
So we ended up joining forces. And that's kind of where I'm at now at 12 Consulting Group.
Cool.
And we've just been growing that business over the past couple of years.
So, yeah, it's like 4-year-old company or.
Uh, we are actually, the company is 7 years
Oh,
old now,
wow.
I think. Or wait, no, sorry, 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many employees now do you guys have?
So we are just over 50 employees.
Okay. So that'll be interesting. We'll ask some questions at the end about the hiring process because, again, when you started out, I think, what, you're like 4 employees, 4 co-founders or.
Yeah, when I joined, we were at 6 employees, I think.
Okay,
So
so you have lots of experience at smaller companies that have gotten pretty big, which maybe some of my students will be joining similar size companies as the whole world adjusts to post-COVID eventually, and
yeah,
some
totally.
startup companies emerge in that space.
There'll be some opportunities for sure.
Nice. Yeah, you did this whole career growth in the kind of post-recession world, right? 2009 was when you graduated, or 2008?
2008. So
Mm.
actually, I think I was, I think I started kind of right before it was getting really
Yeah.
bad. And actually, that's something I definitely remember is, uh, yeah, it was starting to get really bad, and being worried about my job
Yeah.
security. Um, I think that's one thing I actually did at the beginning. I was always asking, how can I help? Like, what can I work
Yeah.
on? Because I wanted to make sure I stayed busy.
Yeah.
And at the time, that was probably more for job security. But looking back after a couple of years of doing that, I realized that like actually was what made me grow so much
Yeah.
more. Is just like trying to get involved in like every
Anything you could help
project I
with?
could
Yeah,
there.
that
Yeah,
makes sense. Yeah, because you didn't have any background in technology or software or anything like that. It was just
no, no, I
your
didn't. So
background was playing pickup basketball like mine.
pretty
Yeah.
much.
All right, well, let's talk about the marketing strategy planning process and
Sounds
ROM,
good.
and please help ask questions and share insights. So today's key topics, just why do we care about having a planning process in the first place? Establishing a control loop, what's that about? And different control metrics that we'll use. Then we'll transition to return on marketing. So a lot of good companies die young. We might see a lot of companies, unfortunately, die now in this period, but Blockbuster is the example I like to talk about because I think all of us of a certain generation remember Fridays. I think me and you went to Blockbuster a ton growing up, just like
Oh yeah.
Fridays, get some movies, get a video game, get some popcorn.
Ah, man, good times.
Yeah. uh,
I think I told you I just found my Blockbuster
oh,
card
nice.
the other day. I was cleaning during quarantine.
Yeah, it's important to hold on to. It'll be a relic. But yeah, it's like a staple of all of our existence, and somehow they managed to screw it up and go out of business, go bust. Um, so I guess in 2004 there were 9,000 stores, and now there's just one, and apparently the last one's actually in Oregon or Alaska. I heard there's some in Mexico, or maybe internet access is not as available. But um, so what did they do wrong? How did they go to nothing and let Netflix and Amazon and Hulu kind of come from nowhere and basically disrupt them? That's kind of our motivation. So it's not just them. There's a lot of companies that are constantly failing and making way for new companies that are able to capture some transition in the marketplace better than them. This is over time. You can see that there's usually every time there's a recession, the average lifespan decreases. So we got 1960 to this is projected out to 2025. But at various times, the average lifespan falls by a lot, then it kind of builds up and falls again. And but overall, there's this big negative trend, such that companies are around for a shorter and shorter period of time as we've seen more and more transition away from kind of the world post World War II, where everything was pretty stable, until around the 60s to from the 60s onward, as we've kind of changed culture, technology, globalization, just a lot of factors have been involved. So this is kind of another way of capturing the big turnover. So these are the most valuable companies in 2008 when you graduated college, and then 10 years later, 2018. So 2008, we see a lot of gas and oil companies. So Exxon, PetroChina, GE, which GE makes a ton of stuff, but they make turbines for creating energy out of oil and coal, and so just basically different energy plants will use a GE turbine. Gazprom, I think, is Russian. China Mobile, telecom in China. ICBC, I think that's a bank in China. Microsoft, AT&T are telecom and software, and then another oil company and P&G consumer durables. So about 70% are directly or indirectly involved in oil and gas. And so I guess that was the most efficient way to do business back then was basically you have to do something physical in the world, and gas and electricity basically made that more efficient so you could do it faster. Now, 2018, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, the top four are all switching spots, like who's in first place. But they're pretty stable, and those are all tech companies, right? Berkshire Hathaway is more of like an older company, but that's who's that dude? The rich dude, the rich Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett's company is Berkshire Hathaway, Facebook, Tencent, Alibaba, also tech companies, internet companies. Um, Tencent and Alibaba both being based out of China, and then Johnson Johnson Medical and a bank. So it's kind of interesting, not just in terms of companies going out of business and being acquired and consolidating, but also just who are the most important companies in the world.
So Microsoft, the only one that
Is in both, yeah. And Anaplan will be up there in 2028, right?
That's right.
Hopefully for your stock price. Okay, so what is going wrong? What do you think are issues, or what concerns your clients that you come in and you help get them to transition their software to what Anaplan software that your consulting company helps them make the transition? What are they concerned with? What are the better companies doing right and the worst companies doing wrong? You can have different things than what I have on this list, but I'm just curious what you're seeing out there in the business world.
Um, I think one thing is just unwillingness to change. You know, thinking that what they had that's been working is for sure going to work in the
Yeah.
future.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it
hmm
mentality. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, and
How do you
we
help
do
them
see
get
that.
ready to change, or are they ready to change by the time they talk to you?
Um, no, I mean, we definitely do see that, and I think especially with larger companies, it's tough for them to change, right? Because when they get that big, it's tough to change course
Hmm.
and move in a different direction, in an agile way. And so, yeah, a lot of times that is kind of why they'll reach out to us. They realize, they have, again, in our case, it's like we're bringing in software that's supposed to be, more nimble. A lot of times they'll have older software and they realize they can't like
Yeah.
change the software as fast as executives are saying we need to change how we do
Yeah.
something.
So they
So
want to roll
keeping
out
like
like a
IT and
loyalty
the business
program or
aligned.
some employee program, and they can't because it's
hmm
all based on some old computing system that just won't uh, allow that.
Yeah, or yeah, that's a good example. Or like if they want to um, change how sales reps at their company get paid
Mm.
and how their organization is like structured.
Mm.
Um, like that can be a huge effort,
Pain in the
and
ass. Yeah.
yeah,
So they go to some
so getting
conference and learn that like, oh, the best new way of doing like sales compensation is based on customer retention, not based on
right,
just
right.
initial sales. And so like, oh, we should do that, but then they can't because they'd actually have to go into their
hmm
system and update the payroll and all the resulting
Yeah,
other payment systems and financial balance sheets and payment
yeah,
processing. So
yeah, exactly. Or if they
yeah.
just like one more quick example is like if just with the coronavirus and
Mm.
everything, that could really change what their hiring plan might be, what how their customers um, you know might buy. So they might want to do like a lot of like what if scenarios,
Mm.
and so that's another place where we might come in and try to help them build it, like a scenario model.
Okay. So you guys do scenario planning.
hmm
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you think about the psychology of an executive and they have all these employees and they're employees are wanting to do something different, or maybe a few of them are wanting to do something different, but another bunch of them just want to get paid and want to go home and enjoy the weekend or whatever. And you ask them to learn something new or make a big kind of pain in the ass transition to something they're unfamiliar with. It's just a lot of uncomfortability with uncertainty and change the results in that. And sometimes it even requires them to make themselves less useful. So like cloud computing is a big thing in IT space, and we have at the University of Oregon all these IT support staff, and they keep explaining why it's sometimes better to do things at the University of Oregon rather than just use like Google Cloud or Amazon Web Services. And I always kind of
Mm-hmm.
wonder, like, yeah, also might be because of all the benefits they mentioned, but also if we did make that change, are they as important? Because there's someone at Amazon that's basically duplicating whatever they do. So there could be some like self-serving biases that consciously or unconsciously come into play. Um,
Yeah.
I think another factor that's very understandable that we see in research oftentimes is that companies try to extend the market they're serving in a way that makes them lose focus and are just less successful. So they have some initial success in some niche, and then they say, okay, that's great. Let's go ahead and add additional services or add additional product lines or add additional um, revenue generating opportunities. Let's acquire another company. And all of a sudden they get bloated, and like you said, they get too big. They have too many layers of management, and so they're less likely to change through um, adapting, and more likely to try to change through acquisition. It's like we have money, let's just buy our way out of this problem, and that rarely
Mm-hmm.
works. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the other thing is, yeah, technology shifts, and people don't account for that. Market taste shifts, so that's just consumers are changing. Competition knocks them out. And lastly, they just manage products and profits and not customers. So that's um, trying to
Yeah.
think like what's uh, the most direct path to hitting my quarterly numbers. Like I need to have the sales numbers, I need to have the profit numbers,
Yes.
and I don't really care if it's good for my customers and my long-term relationship with them. I just want to make sure I look good when I report earnings.
Oh man. Yeah. And that last one definitely have seen before. I think managing products and profits, not customers. So, sometimes companies, if they're driven by shareholders and they're trying to grow, as fast as possible, you know, it's really easy for, that to trickle down to the sales reps at the company
Mm,
where, then the sales reps have these really high targets because they have to meet the numbers of the
yeah,
executives and, they're getting pressure. And so the sales reps will just sell whatever they
even
can,
if it's not
even
going to
if it's
work
like
or
even if
yeah.
it's,
Have you have
all,
you heard of customer success management?
yeah. Yeah. We have that. Um, yeah, that's for what we do, to kind of, yeah, I think that keeps the sales reps in check a little bit,
Hmm.
because it's basically, don't go promise that we can
Yeah,
that you're presenting.
yeah. Your audio is
uh,
cutting out, but I think you might have said,
oh shoot.
yeah. I think your headset might have come unplugged. Basically, yeah. You don't want to promise that you can do all these things and then turn it around to your solution team, and then they have to come in and be like, actually, we can't, or we can't do it on that deadline, or we can't do.
Yes.
But if the sales reps
Sadly, yeah.
pushing for growth and revenue, then yeah, you get some short-term lift, but then maybe they're upset later and they churn. Um,
I've been put in that situation a few times. Yep.
so Andy Grove is the old Intel CEO, and he did a major change in Intel's strategy. They originally were just more focused on memory, and then they switched to be more on processing power and basically getting your computer to do things faster. And Intel Inside. And this famous quote was that we're successful, but that success is going to breed complacency, and complacency is going to breed failure. And so we're going to stay paranoid. And so, what can a paranoid company do? What is good paranoia versus bad paranoia? Like, what's useful anxiety versus not useful anxiety? That's just where this marketing strategy planning process comes into play. So usually you identify some issue and then you kind of might do that as part of some SWOT planning process, management planning process, come up with some goals, some tactics, and then some metrics of success. And that's the typical company's path. But the problem is this is a little bit too reactive. It's not purposeful upfront. And it's usually going to be driven by some short-term objectives like we have to hit these, sales numbers. We're not hitting the sales numbers. What are we going to do? And so a control loop is thinking about what meaningful metrics you can be measuring up front such that that will help you identify the issues that are most critical. And to do that, you need to have a company mission and good market research that's going to inform that. So what's the purpose of your company? Why does your customers care that you exist? What is the purpose for your employees? I don't know. I'll ask you to say what your mission is at 12 or what Anaplant's mission is, but I think it's funny, like the typical stereotypical Silicon Valley company with this mission to change the world and make a big difference. How do you do that if you're just selling business to business software to like help a company be better at managing their business by having better data accessible to them on their computer? Like, how do you get
Well,
people
yeah,
fired up to join your company, or how do people
yeah.
get people to
Well,
join Anaplan?
I mean, I think actually, we're in kind of a fortunate space for this actually exact thing because I think kind of what we're doing is helping companies with their control loop
Mm,
planning process. And so, our mission statement is, unlocking potential with smarter data.
mm-hmm.
So, ideas we're supposed to, with that data, give companies, the executives and the, operational managers, more time to focus on analyzing as opposed to like spending time, in all of the weeds and the
Like
data.
formatting or yeah.
Yeah, or just collecting data.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you're passing around hundreds of Excel
Yeah.
spreadsheets between hundreds of
Yeah.
managers, it's just really hard to do. And so, yeah, a lot of times what we'll do is go in, understand the company's, business process.
Mm-hmm.
We'll put it into, like a process flow diagram, kind of like with what you're showing, um, and and then build that in a model.
Yeah. And so do your clients sometimes it's only like one business unit will adopt your software, but other business units are doing something completely different, or is it when you work with a company, the whole entire company goes ahead and uh, implements your guys'
Uh,
software and solution?
yeah, that's a good question. It definitely depends on the company. So some companies it'll be, company wide, but then, you know, other, huge, Fortune 50
Yeah.
companies or Fortune 10 companies, a lot of times we'll start with the business unit,
Okay.
and just try to do the, crawl, walk, run
Hmm.
approach. Um,
So one business unit will go ahead and try it, and they have enough independence that it makes sense for them, and then if it works, then it's
hmm
easier to get the rest of the company to adopt it. Yeah.
Yep.
I know
Yep.
some people at Nike
And
who are on the kind of data operations management logistics side of things, and they get frustrated because different aspects of their business use, like some just use Excel that is just on like one person's laptop, and that one manager will just refuse to use the system that they've implemented. So they'll have like Tableau and they have like all these data management tools, and but it's like the manager's like, no, I'm using my laptop. Like I've been doing it.
uh,
I've been managing our retail partners with my laptop for the past 20 years, so I'm not going to change. And then it kind of screws things up for the rest of the business. But
we do see that
yeah,
for sure. Adoption is definitely a challenge. I think just because it's it's change for people who've been doing it a certain way for a long time,
yeah,
but a lot of times that'll have to come from like the top down executives to like help drive that.
just basically force people to change.
Yeah, I mean a combination of that and then just really working with those people and saying like, okay, how can we actually you know
Get you to,
make your life
yeah,
better? Like, what are the pain points?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, we always get told to like adopt some new software, and all the faculty are like, "Yeah, I'm gonna use this other thing." Like, and the university buys the software, but we don't use it all the time. Um,
Well, a lot of times, I mean, that'll work for smaller organizations
yeah,
to just work in Excel or something like that. But when you get to a company that's, over 1,000 people and then over 10,000 people, like if you think about it, like your control loop process changes,
yeah,
right? What works when you have 10 employees
yeah,
is probably not going to work when you have 50. And what works when you have 50 employees probably isn't going to work when you have
yeah.
a
And
thousand.
I'm presenting this simplistically as it's just something for a big whole entire company. But yeah, you could do a similar thing for just your sales organization for just one product or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Um,
Yeah.
so to make this kind of come alive, we're going to walk through Blockbuster and pretend we're in charge of the company back in when we were in high school running around. Um,
Awesome.
so basically, their
Sounds
mission is it's not too bad. They want to provide their customers with the most convenient access to media entertainment, including games, movies, and game entertainment. Um,
sounds like Netflix.
yeah, exactly. I guess Netflix doesn't or hasn't yet invested in games. Or gaming, not that I know
Hmm,
of. It'd be interesting to see if
true.
they make a move in that direction. Amazon, I heard, is going to start producing their own video games, and they own Twitch, which is like a huge video game streaming platform. But
Hmm.
so Amazon's definitely like trying to do all of this, like for sure. So one thing I don't really love about this, or that I think could be improved, and maybe you wouldn't want to have this out there in the world, but I would try to refine who my target customer is. So just instead of saying our customers, like, well, who's the target customer? I think for Blockbuster, probably where they add the most value is for people in more suburban settings where they didn't have access to a lot of other entertainment options, especially families. I think was one place where they did really well. I think like Netflix, I saw something like 70% of Netflix accounts have children on the account. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, in-home convenient entertainment is really going to resonate with
Families.
families,
Yeah.
especially in suburban environments. So you could
Mm-hmm.
specify your target market a little bit better, and then that might help you stay on top of changes that need to be made. Another thing is this media entertainment. If it was changed to be just in-home entertainment, I think that also could have expanded how they thought about what they're doing for customers and provided more opportunities to differentiate themselves. So,
Yeah, could have been a clue to
yeah,
like we need, people don't want to go to stores eventually.
yeah,
to stay.
yeah. So like Costco, um, you can go to Costco and you can buy tickets to the movies or tickets to like a Sacramento Kings game, or sometimes like Costco will sell you experiences at Costco. Like I don't know why Blockbuster couldn't have done that when you're checking out. Like yeah, even have like a vacation package for the family to go on like Disney cruise adventure or something like that. So expanding, tightening up the target customer, and then expanding or broadening really the value proposition. So it's not so product centric. Like
Hmm.
this is very much a product, could have potentially provided them points of differentiation. They did sell other things, right, related to it, like get some popcorn, get some uh, snacks. Some I'm trying to guess or trying to
Oh, that's
remember what
right.
your
Yeah,
favorite.
ice cream,
Yeah, were you a Dippin' Dots guy? I can't remember.
Dippin'
Yeah,
Dots. Oh yeah.
or Reese's. That's my. Um, yeah. So, anyways, that's one thing they could change, but it's pretty good, and I think the most important thing that they have identified here that's going to be relevant to the next slide is this convenient aspect. So, in terms of the issue, go back in time. Blockbuster launches, DVD by mail. What's the issue in terms of Blockbuster once Netflix launched? What do you? How would you have kind of defined the issue that they faced? You're playing the role of the
The
students. I would be calling on students in
Okay.
class right now. So see
Okay.
if you can pass.
So the issue is it? I mean, is it tied to like the weakness you mean,
Yeah,
or
exactly. Yeah.
okay?
Um, the
Um,
relative weakness or the relative uh, threat as well. It's kind of like an integration of all these. I just threw SWOT up
yeah. I
on
mean,
there because like every business school class has to have a SWOT at some point on one of their slides. So
yeah. I mean, I guess their issue. I mean, a couple of things like competitors, obviously,
yeah,
but I guess more specifically, is their lack of innovation and use of the internet.
Yeah, yeah, they didn't figure out a good way to capitalize on the new technology,
Hmm.
and that's because they were too probably product centric here and not just the benefit. They need to focus on their customer and on the benefit. So the way
Hmm.
I kind of capture it is just they were not convenient in all aspects of their business. They were convenient in some aspects, but inconvenient in others. So compared to Netflix, when the Netflix was doing DVD by mail, one thing that was way more convenient is you could get your video game or your movie and the
Right
popcorn
away.
and the yeah, you get it right away. You don't have to wait
Yeah,
for the mail
yeah,
to come. Uh,
yeah. I actually liked that.
yeah, well, that was we were kind of we don't have anything to do. It's Friday night.
I guess we were behind the curve too.
Well, yeah, we didn't plan ahead for not having plans. Uh, we eventually ran out of houses to knock. You remember that?
I do. I
You want to
do.
describe that for the bored students watching this?
Sure. So in high school, we went to all guys high school. We were pretty bored ourselves,
I was never bored
and
with you.
and after basketball games or on weekends, we would we would drive around, and we wouldn't go doorbell ditching, but we would tie fishing string. We kind of would. We would take fishing string, tie it to someone's doorknob, roll it out to the car, and then we would hide in the car and then pull the string and wait for them to open the door and just hide quietly.
You messed up the
And,
description of it. You said tie it to the doorknob. It
what
wouldn't be very
what
fun if we tied it to the doorknob.
the
Yeah.
knocker, yeah, that's what it's called,
Yeah, so
knocking.
we would spot houses that had a door knocker, and then we would,
Knockers,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a good prank for quarantine time because you can do it while social distancing.
I can't believe you talk about this on your
I,
lecture.
I don't know how else to entertain the students. Yeah,
It was a good time though.
yeah, you
Yeah.
just find a house with a door knocker, tie the fishing string to it, go pull it out to your car across the street, and just you can knock the door knocker from across the street. People would open the door, close it, no one's there, and then we would do it immediately after and sometimes freak people out. Hey,
But one time, this guy, we were doing it to this guy's house, and he, it's dark. We don't see, but he had snuck around the back gate. Next thing we know, he's running out towards our
yeah, that
car,
was.
and we have to speed off.
Ne- uh,
That was actually
yeah, I do not
terrifying.
recommend actually doing this because someone might shoot you. But
Yeah, no, it's kind of
yeah,
dangerous. Don't do it.
and then yeah, we
All
would
right.
drive off fast and almost crash. But yeah, so we didn't have good plans in high school, so we just would go to Blockbuster and watch a movie.
We didn't have much to do.
No, we were kind of in the suburbs of Sacramento. Um, so anyways, yeah, the convenience was that Blockbuster, you could get it on demand. You couldn't do that for Netflix. The inconvenience was really the late fees. So you had it at your house, you spent like $5 to rent the movie, whatever it was. But then if you didn't turn it in on Monday or whenever it was due, you forgot to do it, then you would have to pay a late fee. And what was so hard for Blockbuster to do is to embrace a business model that Netflix had in which you didn't have late fees. For Netflix, their big cost was shipping. So shipping and taking the DVD and putting it back into inventory, then taking it out of inventory and shipping it. So if you paid a monthly fee for Netflix and just got your movie and then sat on it for a month and didn't send it back, that was great for them because they still got the same revenue
Hmm.
but had less costs. For Blockbuster, they needed turnover and volume to get their revenue.
Hmm.
And
You had to rewind
yeah,
it,
you had to hit that
right?
rewind. Not when the DVDs were out, but um, and so the late fees for Blockbuster did two things. One, it made sure that you returned it so someone else could rent it, so they could get more churn or turn out of their inventory. And then the second thing that was important for them is if they charged you a late fee, you weren't that mad because you understand like, oh, I got to return it in time so that someone else can watch it. But it was inconvenient and kind of a pain in the ass. And so Netflix was more convenient on those dimensions. And so um, that was the central issue they faced, is that they were inconvenient in a dimension in which they wanted to be in denial about it. Because they got basically like the base rentals just covered their kind of cost of doing business, and the late fees was where they made their profit. They loved late fees, so they're kind of addicted to it. So the goal would be, based on that issue, to identify some quantifiable objectives for a given period of time, and it needs to fit with your target market and your mission. And so this is a bad goal that you would typically see would be talked about like in a quarterly earnings report for a company. Like, we expect that we're going to increase our revenue this much over the next 6 months. We're going to increase our profits this much over the next, 6 months. A little bit better would be something that's more customer based. So we're going to increase our customer satisfaction by some amount over the next period of time. But the better goal would be that we're going to identify areas of perceived inconvenience, and then we're going to reduce those by 50% over the next 6 months. So that would be very customer focused, would align with your target customer and with your perceived goals. And if Blockbuster simply had done that, had that as a goal, as their most important goal, and stayed on top of it and had some market research team to measure it and make sure that they were on top of any aspect of perceived inconvenience, I promise you they would still exist today, because they would have more quickly seen what Netflix was doing and said, okay, that's more convenient, and adopted option for people to, pay a higher premium price, escape late fees, and they could have done in-store checkout or online order ahead by mail. And they had all this retail footprint, right? That was really the thing that Blockbuster loved. That was like their favorite thing to do, was like plan out where they wanted to open the next store. Because anytime they opened up a new store, they said, okay, we've increased convenience because it's more conveniently located, and we're going to get an increase in revenue. So they were basically like a real estate company that used DVD rentals as a way to make money off real estate, and they weren't really that passionate about their target customer or the solution that target customer is looking for. But crazy story. So the CEO of Netflix, he actually went to Dallas to visit the Blockbuster headquarters and potentially talk about some business development partnerships. And the Blockbuster CEO kind of dismissed Netflix as just like a small, unimportant kind of aspect that just served people who are like internet weirdos, and it was just like a small niche of the market. So they kind of, there's a great quote I like. They say it's hard to get someone to believe something for which their well-being or income depends on it not being true. So if your well-being or your income relies on something not being true, it's going to be hard for you to admit that it's true. If your income or well-being doesn't rely on it, then you're much more to be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That could be true. So it's kind of cognitive dissonance and ostrich head in sand syndrome.
Yeah. It's amazing that they didn't at least like dabble in what Netflix was doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the killer move they could have done is use their brand without even being good at operations themselves. They could have just used their brand and contacted or worked with some other technology company like an Amazon, and just said like, hey, let's use our brand for your like Amazon Prime Video, what eventually became that, and we'll just like collaborate on it. You can have, we can figure out the financials to make it work, but that would have been good for Amazon too, because they would have kind of been able to leverage the existing customer relationships that people had at Blockbuster and convert those people into Amazon Prime members. So it could have been like a win-win in both directions. But it's just amazing to me that this company that was so important to us doesn't even exist. And then,
they would have, and then they would have been bought by Amazon, I'm sure.
Yeah, and they weren't even able to be bought. Like, that's such a crazy failure. They did launch eventually like a program that was supposed to be multi-channel, so you could do mail, you could avoid late fees, you could, pick up stuff at the store. But it's kind of like what you're talking about. They didn't have the systems. The computers wouldn't talk to each other. They had too many people that were basically real estate type people. Like, they came up in the real estate game as like their executives and management, and not in the media or entertainment game. So their transition was just poorly executed, and they didn't embrace it early enough. So once you have the right goals, like the tactics kind of take care of themselves. But if you are just focused on revenue, you're just going to open up another store, and maybe that even increased satisfaction because there's like a store that's closer to you. Um, I think one of the reasons why we
Yeah,
liked hanging out at your house was you guys had that Blockbuster right by your house, your parents' house.
right. I remember that.
We could walk to it. Uh,
But yeah, I mean, I think kind of tied into the control loop. I think probably when they started, they were growing really fast, I'm sure, and maybe they had a control loop that worked
yeah,
for a period of
yeah,
time. But it's kind of like that, what got you here won't get you there. So
yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
so it's analyzing that control loop and
Adapting
making
it,
sure
yeah.
you're adjusting.
And if
Yeah.
it's mission focused, you should pick it up better than if it's
Hmm.
more outcome focused. So like these top two are more outcome focused. This bottom one's the only mission focused goal. Um, Reed Hastings, the
Hmm.
CEO of Netflix, was like this, someone who believed in the internet and the power of the internet and kind of saw into the future and thought, not streaming, but he thought everything would be download based. Like you download what you want to watch. And he just used DVD by mail to like be the first step. Netflix also did, what's the red little thing at the supermarket where you can get
Ooh,
DVDs? Yeah.
Redbox.
Redbox spun out of that, out of Netflix. And you know what else spun out of Netflix? Is Roku. Like how innovative a
Really
company, yeah. I think that's true.
interesting.
Don't Google it. I might be wrong. But yeah, all those kind of were part of Netflix's original vision of, being focused on the target customer and being more open to changing the product
Wow.
to provide the benefit. But so Netflix had this kind of revelation of like, okay, I believe in the internet, Reed Hastings, and had to go out of the house on a Sunday morning and just backed out of the driveway, right? And passed the mailbox right next to the house, went to Blockbuster, put in the DVD in the little mail slot, drove back home and went right past that mailbox again. It was like, damn, I just spent 20 minutes in traffic dropping off this stupid thing to avoid a $5 fine. Like, I could have just stuck it in my mailbox. And it's like, this is
Hmm.
obviously more convenient, at least in terms of late fees and having it come to your house. Um, so, okay. Tactics, I think, yeah, we can all kind of think of our own tactics. We talked about partnering with a different technology company, offering a subscription plan that's multi-channel. It's like store, mail, web. Um, could have easily been done. It wouldn't have taken a lot of management expertise, but might have needed a different
Right.
culture. All right, so what are the important metrics from a marketing standpoint? Well, these are typical, but there might be other ones. So I'll ask you in a second, John, what you guys look at in terms of your customers.
Hmm.
But brand awareness and interest, and you're talking about a new company or a new brand, especially thinking about a funnel. So you start with awareness, then you go to interest and consideration, purchase, trial. So it's like a lot of people become aware just to get a few people to purchase and try. So those are kind of like funnel stats. Satisfaction is post-consumption. Retention is ongoing for customer. Word of mouth is contagion. You know what NPS is? Do you guys use that?
I think that's net promoter
Yeah.
score.
So it's common for a lot of companies. So you can kind of drop that
Hmm.
as a kind of basically acronym for word
Yeah.
of mouth, and people will be like, "Oh, that person knows what they're talking about." Like,
Yeah, we use that.
okay, yeah. So it's like for some reason it got really popular. It's basically
Word of
yeah,
mouth.
word of mouth, and it's you just ask people one
That's how
question
it
on
got
the
popular.
survey. Yeah, yeah, that's a good pun. Share of wallet is what percentage of your customer's business in your category are you capturing? So, like for banking, you have a customer and they might have a savings account with you, but there's also a checking account they might have. They might have an investment account. They might have a credit card, a debit card, an investment account, a car loan, a home loan. So, of all those kind of financial services, what percent do you have? Wells Fargo was obsessed with that, and that's why Wells Fargo, that was like the one metric that drove everything they did, and that's why they pressured their salespeople so bad to open up fake accounts and fake customers' names. Or like they'd get someone to have a savings account, but they wouldn't even put any money in it just so they could say they had another kind of line of business with that customer.
Yeah, there was a documentary that just came out about that,
On
right?
Netflix, I didn't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, there is.
Cool.
I think it's, I forget what it's on, but yeah, it's on Netflix.
It's a crazy story. I hate Wells Fargo. Like, just from back in the day, I used to bank with them, and they made me mad with some fees for international travel on my credit card. But you make me mad once, I'll hate you forever. Remember that, John.
All right, noted.
You've made me mad.
People,
You've
yeah.
made me mad before. And then customer lifetime value, which is just projecting out into the future, like what's the revenue and costs that are going to be associated with any customer, and how long are you going to keep them? And then that kind of gives you a present value of each of your customers that's forward looking. So those are all customer level key metrics. Um, do you guys use any of that, or you said use Net Promoter Score? But what's important to you guys?
Yeah. Um, yeah, we use Net Promoter Score, CSAT, which is customer satisfaction. So yeah, so we get both of those just from sending out surveys to our customers after every project we do. Um, and then
Do you have compensation tied to that? So if one of your employees works with a client, they get bonuses based on that, or
not
yeah,
directly, not
yeah,
directly. We kind of track how our consultants are doing based on utilization. So for us, it's like, how many hours are they billing,
mm,
per month?
yeah,
Like, what's their
yeah,
utilization rate? And they should be billing at least like, 80% of the time. So that's one. So
yeah,
there's, yeah, different measures of, measuring how our team's
yeah.
doing. And then there's measures of how our customers are doing, which is what we talked about,
Like
mostly on
how
survey.
much they're utilizing your software, or what percentage of their employees are interacting with it, or
Um, we don't measure that as closely,
uh,
but we do measure like renewal
oh, okay,
rate.
yeah,
So like what percentage of our companies,
yeah,
I guess you have that, yeah,
yeah,
retention.
exactly.
So yeah, I think a lot of these ones, and then I think the other kind of big thing that we're always measuring, especially comes in, it's huge right now with, coronavirus,
Mm.
is what does our pipeline look like, and making sure that
For planning,
we always have, mhm,
yeah.
yeah, like do we have enough deals, number of deals in the pipeline, the size of those deals. So that's something we're just, constantly measuring to
So if you have a
make
lot of
sure.
deals coming in, you can hire more people, but if you don't, then you can't hire more people,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Mm-hmm.
Makes
Yep.
sense.
Yep.
Um, Another kind of more higher level than the individual customer would be strategy or goal level. I don't have employee level like you talked about, but there's return on assets, which is kind of like a utilization rate. So if you think of each employee or consultant as an
Mm-hmm.
asset for you guys, the utilization rate of them would be kind of like return on assets. So that's good for
Yeah.
thinking about the efficiency, and then you can try to improve that over time through training or investing in their human capital. Or does it help them do better if they get more time off? Does it help them do better if you change their compensation? You can try to mess with that if you have that as a metric. Customer portfolio value would just be taking the customer lifetime value and adding it up across all your customers. Or you could do a cohort. So you might bring in 1,000 customers every quarter, and so you can kind of track them over time for different cohorts, and you might find out like, oh, after we made this change in our service experience, our customer portfolio value or our cohort portfolio value has gotten better because we got more successful upselling, cross-selling, retention.
Mm-hmm.
And then company level, there's share price or profit. Tobin's Q is kind of like looking at share price and customer financial metrics. And then what isn't a part of enough businesses, I'd say, is mission metrics. So if you don't have a well-defined mission, or you just say you have a mission but you don't use it to measure your success, then you're not going to have that control loop like we introduced in the slides before with Blockbuster. So you can do fine, you can be very efficient in how you manage things, but then the market will change, technology will change, circumstances will change, the health epidemic will occur, and then all of a sudden it's kind of you find yourself dislocated from where you had value and someone else comes
Mm-hmm.
in and does better. So I
Mm-hmm.
think from like a consulting standpoint, that could be something that you guys could potentially add as like a higher level value proposition for your clients is, all right, they already are doing all this other stuff and you're going to help them do that better. But if they really want to be robust for changing circumstances, like do they have a good way of capturing their mission? Is their mission well defined? Does it resonate with their employees? Does it resonate with their customers? And are there kind of a multi-dimensional, at least three-factor way of seeing how they're doing on the mission that'll keep you alive through changing circumstances? Um,
And you mean like for our
yeah,
clients?
like that just came to me. I'm just trying to give you advice for coming on the call
Yeah.
with my students, but
Well, yeah, that's actually so that's actually pretty tied into what we do.
mm,
So like every project we do, we have like a project manifesto, which is exactly like that. It's basically like a mission
mm,
statement for the project. So it might not be like their company wide
yeah,
mission statement, but it's like it's their mission for the project. Like what do they want to get out of it? And a lot of times projects, you're dealing with tens or sometimes hundreds of
yeah,
people, and you'll get pulled in so many different
yeah,
directions, and everyone has their own
objective or yeah,
agenda or objective. But like if you kind of bring it back to that mission or
yeah,
project manifesto, it's yeah, super helpful.
nice. That makes a lot of sense. Getting people on the same page and reaffirming why you're doing this in the first place when they're getting kind of caught up in some small detail.
Yep.
Okay, so ideally, any short-term metric you have, such as like satisfaction, net promoter score, sales, brand awareness, brand interest, something that really can change on a customer-to-customer basis or week-to-week basis. Ideally, those align well with your long-term strategy and with your mission. Um, okay, so what are the benefits of having a tight control loop? I think the number one benefit is having a culture of experimentation. So if you don't really have a good feedback mechanism to see if what you're doing is going to help, you're less likely to go ahead and take small risks and try to make changes. So the rate of experimentation would slow down, and usually it's a much more bureaucratic organization where any change needs to be approved
Yeah.
by a manager, a manager, a manager, a manager. Um, versus
Yeah. That idea of
if you have the good data, then you can just say, go ahead, try it, and we'll see if it works or not. We have what
mhm.
the numbers looked like a month ago. We have what the numbers look like for another salesperson or another part of the organization. So go ahead, like here's some freedom, have fun, figure it out, and then
Yeah.
we'll be happy if it works. Um,
Yeah, the culture of or the idea of like fail
yeah,
fast. And that's something we actually do in our projects too. Like we don't just like get all the requirements at the beginning, do the projects, and then like show them the result at the
hmm
end. So we kind of do these like 1 or 2 week like sprints, we call them. It's like the agile implementation method,
yeah,
it's called. You do these 1 or 2 week sprints where it's like, okay, we're going to build, show you what we have. It's okay if that's not
yeah,
perfect. You can even change the requirements a little bit at that point if you want, because that's like built into the process that we're going to we know we're going to make
tweaks, yeah.
adjustments and tweaks.
Yeah, I think I would, if I could, early on in my career, definitely prioritize a company that has a culture of experimentation and learning over one that's going to like pay me the most money early on.
Mm-hmm.
Because usually you start your career, you're low on the totem pole, and so, or you don't have a lot of power, and if people don't like your ideas, you just can't do it. But if you're going to find out quickly if it worked or not, and if people trust the data or trust the feedback loop, then they'll give you a little bit more of a leash to try to implement some idea you have, and then you can find out if it works or it doesn't work. Um,
Right.
I think the best example I have of that is we did some work when I was a PhD student at UW with Blockbuster, not Blockbuster, they're on my mind, Starbucks. So they were trying to sell gift cards for the holidays that came in packs. They were like these, you could like buy a 10 pack of these gift cards that were like maybe like $5 or $10 each, and then you would kind of rip them up. They're like these kind of cute little cards, and then hand them out to like your mail carrier, your your child's teacher, your kind of coworker, or whatever. Um, and they wanted to figure out how to best kind of display them in their store and get people to understand what they are quickly in checkout line and then buy them. And they didn't work very well, but the process that we used to kind of learn how to go ahead and present them in the store that worked uh, well, even though the product wasn't that well designed, or it didn't turn out to be very successful, was just letting store managers do whatever they wanted, like 10 experimental store managers, and then just see which one had the most success, and then ask them what worked. And then when they did the major rollout for all the stores, the next week they could go ahead and have like some bullet points in the email to the store managers, like at our first 10 stores, these were worked the best. And what worked the best was walking around with a tray of sample treats and also having the cards and just saying like, hey, would you like a treat? Oh, did you know about these gift card packs? No one at kind of headquarters would have thought of that ahead of time. They would have thought like,
Yeah.
where do we put it on the display? Like, how do we place it? What does it look like? Do we have
Yeah.
a sign or not? So
Got to get creative.
yeah. So anyways, yeah, if you constantly get feedback on what's working, you can get more efficient. So like have your utilization of your assets higher. So return on assets, or in this case, return on marketing. Um, you want to know like, okay, we invested in this, or we tried this experiment, or hired this person. Is it being effective? And if not, what changes can we make to improve it? And then you can just be more mission focused. So, Netflix and Amazon Prime basically beat Blockbuster because they famously have a culture of experimentation. They empower employees to make more decisions kind of at the endpoints, and then they have the data to find out if it works or not. So you can give your employees more freedom. Blockbuster was much more of a hierarchical, top-down control. Like, let's go through a planning session. What stores are we gonna open? And it makes sense if like you only think about expansion through opening a new store. It's not really an experiment type thing because you don't want to open a whole entire new store and then shut it down like a few months later. So software naturally fits with experimentation. Um, okay, return on marketing. We kind of just introduced it, but did you watch Mad Men?
I never really got into that
Oh,
show.
good. You got a quarantine watch for you. It starts a little slow, but it's really well written. I liked it a lot. So Don Draper's the guy that says half of all money spent on marketing is wasted, but the other half is useful. So then the question is, why don't you just only spend the money that's useful and not the part that's not useful? And then back then in the 60s, the answer is they didn't know which half is which. So return on marketing is just trying to get data on how effective your marketing spend is and to see what works. So it's a really simple concept, but it's really important for marketers because then we can advocate to the CFOs, to the accountants that we have a high kind of good story to tell around why it's worth investing in whatever we believe, this customer facing project or advertisement or communication or hiring a new salesperson, whatever it is. If we're tracking this, we can justify it to the people who control the budget. So in that sense, it's kind of the most important innovation in marketing strategy. It was introduced around 1995. So very simple, but it requires good data to implement. All right, how do companies measure return on marketing? This is like a slide from some consulting company. I just got it a long time ago, so it's a little out of date. But 20% of companies say they don't measure marketing return on investment at all. Another 20% just use manager's judgment. So it's like if you have a bad manager or they have some biases or they have, just they're just not well calibrated to what actually is effective, then you're kind of, maybe you would be even better off not measuring it at all. The rest of companies use either customer surveys, econometric modeling, experiments, or whatever other is. So that's kind of depressing, but I think that's out of date. I imagine it's gotten a lot better as companies that are in these two buckets up here have probably lost business and have contracted, and companies down here like Amazon, like Netflix, have done better and have gained market share, and so the percentages likely change. I'm just gonna talk about this real quick, and then I got some questions for you, John, for the students on career advice and life advice. So just this is an interesting TED Talk. Should you donate differently by Joy Sun? We're not going to play it right now, but I encourage people to watch it. It talks about how it basically is also covered in this Planet Money story, but how in the past for aid and development at the country level, a lot of organizations would go ahead and bring a bunch of money, do something, and hope it worked, but wouldn't really know if it worked or not. So, example would be like donating livestock and training people on how to use livestock, or donating farm equipment and trying to train them on farm equipment. And what the organization that Choi Sun's a part of did differently is they just gave people money. It's part of this Give Directly, and then they would just go back a year later and see how much the lives improved of the people who got the money, and they would control that or compare that to a different set of people in a similar circumstance who didn't get the money. And because of that kind of feedback or that information on what worked and what didn't, they said basically it's like that Kendrick Lamar rap album where he's like, I'm coming after all of you. I set the bar high. I forget exactly what. He's like the third verse on, I think it was a song called Control, actually, ironically. But
I don't remember.
but yeah, basically he's saying like we're gonna set the bar and then challenge every other philanthropy, charitable organization, nonprofit to beat it. So like you're not even measuring your return. We're measuring return. If we can do better than you just by giving people cash and letting them decide what to do with it, like maybe you should stop doing whatever you think is good for the people you're trying to help and just give them money and let them do whatever they think is best
Hmm.
for them. Because maybe they need livestock, or maybe they need a new roof, or maybe they need to go off to school or get a new well, whatever. So it just gives people more choice over how to utilize that resource. But what I
Hmm.
like is it's the
Interesting.
competitive nature. It's that saying like, okay, we're gonna come in and say like, we know that we improve outcomes by X% with every dollar spent, and then they are pretty aggressive and sometimes disliked because they came in and said like, what's your return on investment, and just challenge the other nonprofits. Okay,
Hmm.
that's
I have to
it
watch that TED Talk.
on the slides today. We went kind of long, not too bad, I guess. Um, so, John, since you're in a role in which you hire people, and um, why don't you talk to my students a bit who are going to be looking for jobs soon about what they should do in terms of their resume, in terms of interviewing, how to stand out, how to, um, yeah, what general advice do you have
Yeah.
that you kind of learned over your own journey, and then also now that you're on the other side of things and are in a hiring role?
Yeah, I guess just with like resumes and interviewing, um, you know, I think actually a lot of like what we kind of talked about with the control loop, right? It's, you know, getting feedback and kind of, failing fast
Yeah,
potentially. It's don't try to have, don't try to necessarily get the perfect resume the first
yeah, you
time.
won't.
Um, yeah, it's just, yeah,
Impossible.
it's
Yeah,
impossible. I think, getting experience interviewing,
yeah. You almost don't want to interview for your ideal job right away. Like you
yeah,
want to not get your ideal job so you can get better at interviewing before you
yeah.
finally get that interview.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you always want to do the best you can, but it's, I think you're going to learn something in every interview you do.
Yeah, I'm
um,
terrible at
and
interviewing.
getting, yeah, and honestly, something you could even do is, record
Hmm.
yourself and um, just, either, through doing that and getting feedback, you can kind of see what your blind spots
Yeah, that
are.
makes sense.
So I think that's definitely valuable kind of early on, especially.
Did you reach out to anyone when you were early on? Like, how did you, when kind of you first graduated college, did you have an
I
internship?
probably had you look at my resume.
Maybe, I can't even remember.
Yeah, I did an internship at Northwestern Mutual where I was selling insurance. It was like life insurance, and I had to cold call. And I learned very quickly
That's not
that
fun.
that was
Yeah.
not for me.
Fail fast.
I did not like cold calling people, and yeah, fail fast.
Well,
Yeah,
especially
and
yeah, if you're life insurance,
yeah, it just didn't really
like
interest me
a
a lot.
20-year-old trying to sell life insurance. I'm not gonna die.
I mean, um, yeah, it was just not for me. But uh, let's see what else. Um, wait, sorry, what was your original
Well,
question?
just general advice on yeah, how do they get information? Like, let's say no companies are hiring right now because of they're just on pause, waiting for things to resolve with coronavirus. Like in the meantime, record yourself. That's good advice. Who else could they
um,
kind of practice with?
yeah, uh, I mean, I think two things. Like one, definitely just explore as much as you can. I mean, I feel like I happened to get into consulting through like my mom's friends was like a recruiter at at this
Okay.
company. So she got me the interview, and I had no idea what it was at
Yeah.
first. She got me the interview, but I mean, she wasn't like super connected with the company, so I still had to go through
Yeah.
like 3 rounds of interviews and everything. And
Yeah.
but yeah, basically, like I just kind of stumbled upon that. So like, I guess my
Yeah.
point there is just explore as much as you can
Yeah.
because there's a lot out there that you might not even be thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
think that kind of
so
reminds me of how we got
yeah,
that job. Someone who's in Nordstrom was Tony, who we played basketball with. He got us the job basically. Or did you get the job the right way and I got the job through him?
no, that's how
Oh
we
yeah,
got
yeah, I
it.
hooked it up. Yeah, so like thinking of just talking to people who you kind of can connect with in the world, I think is it could be your mom's friend, it could be some dude you play basketball with. Yeah,
Networking, yeah, I mean,
you
yeah,
can
just get out there and talk to
volunteer
people.
at like some food bank or some charity or coach little league or whatever, and find someone
Yeah,
who is there that kind of you have resonate with, and then ask them for advice and get to know their story.
yeah,
Um,
totally. Yeah, explore. Yeah, I guess I was originally thinking like, explore online for stuff, but totally you're right. I think looking at your network,
so,
that's actually probably the best way to go. One other thing I was going to
mhm.
say that you kind of made me think about is, um, I worked at my first company for out of college for 3 years, and I did pretty well there. Was getting promotions, and you know, I think when you're straight out of college, you're going to get an entry level salary in most cases, which isn't always the highest.
Yeah,
And mine definitely was not.
yeah, in San
And
Francisco too. It's
yeah,
expensive.
and I mean, mine was I could barely afford rent
Yeah,
for sure. But you know, even though I was doing well and getting promoted, you'd get a 5% raise or 7% raise max each
yeah,
year. And if you're starting really low at a really low salary, that's it's going to take you a really long time to do anything or build it to
yeah,
a higher level. So like for me, and I think I've seen with a lot of people, like um, it's hard to get your first company to look at you
yeah,
as not a college
yeah,
student. So once you have the skills, and it's all about the skills. So like once you have those skills, if you can interview at another company or use your network and prove your value, you can easily like double your
yeah,
salary in a lot of cases. And that's one thing that like I feel like I kind of stumbled upon, but I almost stayed at that first company for a long time,
yeah.
or, and didn't leave. In which case, I would have missed out on a lot of earning
Yeah, I
potential.
remember when you switched and you said that your old company wanted to like now all of a sudden they wanted to pay you more.
Oh yeah, and then they wanted to
Yeah,
match
and
it.
you're like,
It's
no, I'm
like,
gone. Like,
why were you paying me that
yeah,
before?
yeah. I think that's
So
totally
yeah,
true. Like people see you the way they first encountered you. Like even like
it's hard to
yeah, if your
change impressions, even
our
if
parents
yeah,
see us, they're like, oh, that's John the high school kid, not like John the
our
adult.
parents,
Yeah,
yeah, Still see us as high school
Yeah,
kids,
it's like
probably.
no one asked me for advice around marketing. Like in my whole extended family, it was like because I used to just be the dumb kid, but now it's like maybe I know something that would be valuable, but they're not asking for advice because I'm
Yeah,
always that little kid to them. But yeah,
totally.
so yeah, taking chances, finding people who don't know you and then get to know them, like that's
Hmm.
I think yeah, volunteering or some mutual interest like basketball is the secret there.
Hmm.
But then practicing's good. Oh, recruiting, you said recruiter. Like I've had a lot of students who go ahead and they say, I want to live in Portland, or I want to live in Seattle, or I want to live in San Francisco, and they'll get their first job through some recruiter who gets paid to basically place people into jobs, and then the
Hmm.
recruiter might get like 20% of your salary for the year just for placing you. So that's why it's important to switch. But at least you get
Yeah,
your feet underneath you, you get settled, you can start to
yeah,
network.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, honestly, I think for the first couple years, and like, my first couple years, I was making, yeah, again, barely enough to
yeah,
survive. But yeah, the first couple years, it's not about making a lot. It's about finding what you like, learning, and exploring different things.
yeah.
So it's definitely the time to do that.
Of your college friends, what percentage of them switched jobs like in the first 5 years?
Um, let's see. I mean, I would say a lot, like going to school in New York,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them kind of did banking.
Mm,
So a lot of them stayed in that. I knew I didn't really want to do that. So,
mm-hmm.
but yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of them stayed in that
Okay, so that was a bad
who were
question.
in that. I mean, no, I had some who
Yeah,
jumped around,
yeah,
but, yeah, I mean, a lot of my other friends have kind of, explored different things. More so, I think in like, my friends in California
yeah,
where there's different things, different
yeah,
industries. They've jumped around more, and I think have done well.
yeah. Cool. So if any of my students want to hit you up for a practice interview or for advice on their resume, can they contact you? If the answer is no, I'll
Yeah,
edit this
sure.
out of the video.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so how would they find you on LinkedIn or?
Yeah, that's probably the best way.
Okay. So it's John Wihtol. How do you spell Whittle?
You really don't know that at this point?
Wihtol? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Good job.
Oh,
Jeez.
I know it. I just didn't want to mess it up on the Zoom. All right, cool. Well, thanks for. I know it's the end of your long day of work, so you work from home, but I hopped on the call to help the next generation. That's kind of you, and I appreciate it. I'm sure
Yeah.
they
Thanks for
they
having me.
appreciate it. Hopefully, it made the lecture material a little bit more fun to sit through. Um,
Yeah. Good chatting.
yeah, we'll have to. I'll hit you up after the call's done, but I'm gonna hang up on you now.